Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Nerdy Affair, where we take your favorite pop culture thing and put it on a blind date with our favorite hobby, tabletop role-playing games. I'm Cody.
Yeah. And I'm the violin guy who comes up to the table and plays an awkward song during the dinner.
Oh.
I'm Joe.
Nice.
I don't actually know how to play the violin, so it makes it that much more awkward.
Ooh, like, yeah, so...
Screech, 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 screech.
I hope I can find awful violin, free...
It's not that hard. And then you know what makes it even more awkward, Cody, is, of course, they're eating at a barbecue place, which is like a horrible place to have a blind first date, but hey... I'm not judging either of these two things.
I feel like that's a bold move to go to a barbecue place as your first blind date, because that's kind of it is a very revealing process to eat barbecued food, right?
It's true. It's a power move.
It is a power move.
Here's the thing. What if you eat all those ribs just so delicately? It's like nom 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 nom.
I wouldn't. I would be a monster.
You respect the wings, or you respect the ribs and the wings, because you got a big old basket of smoked wings over there, baby.
Now I'm just getting hungry.
And then a dude who doesn't know how to play the violin walks up and starts playing an Italian standard in the middle of this barbecue place.
Now, here's the question I have to ask you about that. Is this man wearing a full tuxedo, or is he dressed to the comfort level of the barbecue place?
That's a great question, Cody.
Because it would be even more awkward and out of place if he was in like a full tuxedo, but like the people, like the wait staff is like wearing jeans and like a polo with, you know, Buckaroo Banzai's barbecue like embroidered on the polo.
Yo, I'd eat at a place called Buckaroo Banzai's Barbecue. I don't know. I'd buy one of those shirts. If I was traveling home from if I was on like a road trip and I saw a shirt with Buckaroo Banzai, I'd buy the hell out of that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that he is wearing a tuxedo t-shirt and no one's quite sure how to react to it.
Ooh, that's even more awkward because he's like, I understand I needed it to be fancy, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, or maybe people are like into it. They're like, "Ha, that's so funny."
Yeah. I guess it really depends on where you are, and like,
it's like a joke from one of my favorite situational comedies.
What is one of your favorite situational comedies?
Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory.
Anyway, hey Cody,
we gotta stop the podcast. There's no way I'm gonna put a fucking.
I think you should quadruple it. I think you should isolate the audio, and then you could use that to blackmail me for all time. When I signed the contract to host this weird reality dating show. Yeah, it was a 2-for-1 deal. We got that evil book from Lore Masters investigation, and we got this weird game show. Like, it's weird, right? Like when we record the other shows, it's like a pretty standard podcasting microphone, but for this one, it becomes one of those like weird long silver microphones from like game shows back in like the 70s. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about.
100%.
Yeah, it's weird. It transforms for just this episode, and then like there's like an old TV star who like used to be famous back in the day, and she's smoking a cigarette, and she's real mean to me.
Oh,
no one can
why
hear
is
this.
she
This
mean?
just happens in my. Because have you ever watched old episodes of Match Game, Cody? Were you not raised by your grandmother who loved watching old game shows on the Game Show Network, and that was like probably the only reason that she babysat you, because you had Game Show Network and she didn't?
You know, that's very specific, so I'm gonna have to say no.
Yeah, no, there was like these two people who sat in the back, and it was a gentleman from the 70s who was like very clearly gay but not allowed to be gay, and this like old former like sitcom star, and they would just sit there and they would smoke cigarettes and they would be mean to the host, and they were hilarious.
Gotcha. Well, I don't mean to pull us out of this bit into another one, but do you see that group over there with all the swords and magic wands and shit?
Yeah, that doesn't seem very safe. This is a residential neighborhood.
Yeah, and I don't know if that pole arm that the monk is using is registered.
I don't think he even knows what registration is.
Probably not.
Hey, guys, it's you and a party of adventurers.
Welcome.
I will kill the bit. I will kill the bit.
So, last week, I posed a question, or a prompt for this, and I'll say it again, for those of you who may or may not want to try to figure it out before Joe inevitably gives up, because this one's too good.
Yeah, this one's pretty good, guys.
You and a group of adventurers must sneak into a magic organization to get revenge you rightfully deserve.
Man, this one's a toughie.
This one is tough. This was a pretty big poll. The only clue I will give you is it's because we know the media is a television show.
It's a television show.
The only thing I will give you beyond that is it's on Netflix.
On Netflix. Is it Stranger Things?
No. Definitely not that. So
they're not really magical on Stranger Things, that evil organization, really. Like
right.
Hit me. Make me feel dumb, Cody.
The answer is The Order, which if you haven't heard of before, you should at least check out the title and maybe the first couple episodes, because it's literally about a boy who joins a magic cult at a magic school so that he can get revenge on his dad, who's an asshole or whatever.
Man, you know what? Like, I don't even know if the algorithm has like shown me that show.
And you know what's funny is it's a Netflix original.
Yeah, they love showing me their originals. They're like, hey, because you watched this documentary about like cruelty in like the canned tuna industry, you know what you would probably love, my dude? You'd probably love a season of BoJack Horseman. And you're like, I mean, it does sound depressing, but and it is, but a good show. Oh man, Cody, look over there. It's a secondary team of adventurers who just beat the shit out of the Order kids.
Whoa! One of them just shot an arrow at me.
The Order kids or my guys?
Your guys.
You don't know if my guys have arrows. You don't know their lives. You don't know their situation yet.
So here's the thing, though. They shot an arrow at me, so, like, one of them is
to the
either...
drawing board, I suppose. Okay. Okay, so this one is a multimedia. That has been in multiple iterations and things like that. But you and a team of adventurers need to protect your homeland from your relative who is trying to exploit its resources.
Huh.
I'll say it again.
Yeah, say it one more time for me.
You and a team of adventurers need to protect your homeland from your relative who is trying to exploit its resources.
Huh. And it's multimedia, so that it's got several platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
So yeah, if you ruminate on this, if you listen to it, if you have an idea or you have an answer or something like that, please tweet at us what you think the answer is at our Twitter, which is _fandomr_podcast.
Yes.
And at fandom_podcast with the hashtag #FandomR_adventures.
Yeah.
All right, cool. We got the. All right, good job. All right, hey Cody.
Yeah.
Behind behind sitting sitting in the chair behind me is everyone's favorite eligible bachelor or et, depending on what you think works better. It's Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
They're clapping. It'll be in post, but they're clapping.
That was me cheering. This 5th edition of the popular tabletop role-playing game is a great springboard for trying out new, unique, and different ideas. And they're always looking for love. Now, in the other chair, behind the curtain, we want you to meet your blind date. Why, it's the comic book story classic Fables.
Yeah.
No applause. All right. So anyway, Fables is a comic from Vertigo Comics, which is like the DC. It's a DC imprint, so it like technically exists in the DC universe, but not quite. So it's one of those deals where it's like DC publishes it, but it's like in a parallel world or whatever, and maybe could come into like the main world, but it probably never will. It's a world of various storybook characters who are living in a secret neighborhood of New York. There are various characters, things like Bigby, the Big Bad Wolf. You have Little Boy Blue. You have Jack from the Jack and the Beanstalks, and things like that. And the thing about this is, it sounds like it could be like so many other things, but there are things that make Fables unique. It has a dark tone without necessarily becoming grim dark. It's not like those things that think they're so clever where they're like, did you know that the Brothers Grimm were actually really fucked up? And it's like, yeah, kind of piecemealed that together there, bud. It includes a lot of interesting things. It includes interpersonal relationships, political intrigue, and solid mysteries. So there's a lot of fun things about this setting and this franchise that we thought might be fun for a 5th edition setting of a role-playing game. So yeah. Do you want to give us your first point, Cody, or your first thoughts on this blind date? I'm leading into it this week.
Yeah, no, I like this bit. I think we should continue to do it.
Hell yeah. If I can remember that announcer voice for like next week.
Right. So I am not a person who is super knowledgeable about Fable. So I'm coming out the gate with that in mind. Okay. I have read the first not paperback comic,
it's called the trade paperback.
Yeah. So I've read first couple of chapters, and my wife is really into Fables, so I've heard more than I feel like I'm kind of like an honorary citizen in Fabletown without actually have knowing or got the correct papers. But it's super interesting, and I really like this setting, and I feel like if you've been following us, much like Harry Potter, I would suggest that you play in the space, but run a game that runs differently than how the comics go.
Interesting.
For a myriad of reasons. I think if it was me, instead of just replaying the classics, because I feel like that's kind of, if I wanted to replay the classics, I'd just read the comic books, yeah? I would try doing something where in this case, the kind of overarching villain for the beginning of the Fables story, the adversary, I would choose somebody different Fable.
Okay.
I'd also run a game where the preconceived notions of certain characters are not set in stone. For example, maybe Snow White is actually a really awful person, or maybe some of the villains are actually good guys. I would leave it open so that your players have something new and exciting to do, but still play in that space. That being said, my first kind of big bullet point or conversation topic is
Cody tweet.
What?
Tweak. I'm sorry. I was trying to do a thing. Okay, carry on. I thought we could call our Joe and Cody tweaks.
Yeah,
so
my Cody tweak. I get it now.
I quit. I quit the podcast. I'm done.
No. Can't do it now. You signed the book. You're forever bound to this. But I think my first tweak...
I'll sign any book that comes my way.
The players need to play a Fable.
Okay.
I know this seems kind of like a no-brainer, but the class should fit the character. I think if somebody, like, for instance, if someone wants to play Bigby, which is one of the main characters, like, I suggest reflavoring the Barbarian and having the rage mechanic be his, quote-unquote transformation. These characters should also have personal conflicts with NPCs, something that shouldn't be easy to tackle, and obviously something that, like, because of the preconceived notions of Fables, if you're in Fabletown, the premise is that you've left your fairy tale life behind, so you kind of have a clean slate. Mm-hmm. But, like, just because you have a clean slate doesn't mean that, like, you can't have a personal conflict being like, yeah, so, like, Captain Hook is here, and, like, he killed my family, and even though we have a clean slate, I'm still fucking pissed at him. Like, those are the kind, like, they should have personal conflicts, because these are going to be big, important parts. I feel like, to a certain degree, from what I've read anyways, Fables likes to delve into the various stories and how they got to where they are. And that's, like, a really cool aspect that I like about Fables, and that should, like, come out in play, is, like, you should have some kind of history with another Fable, and, like, build that up, and, like, maybe you overcome it, maybe at the end of the day, your rage against that other PC causes you to, like, off them or something. Like, that is something that should be explored in the game. And then, along with, like, just general tabletop role-playing games, there should also be a bond with some of the other players. I think this will add a layer of drama when bad things start to happen to individuals. And this is kind of a DM note, like, don't go and kill off or ruin everyone's ties to the world, but, for an example, maybe one of the characters has a tie to Goldilocks and she needs help with a loan shark that's taking advantage of her low income, and all of a sudden, like, now your character's invested because, oh, I'm really good friends with Goldilocks. So, players need to play a Fable, and they need to be, like, interwoven, because all of these characters, from what I've read online and in this first comic, they're all, like, intertwined in such a, like, a very very beautiful and delicate way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but that's my first
agree.
tweak.
As I was looking at this, I realized that, like, man, boy howdy, we don't have to tweak this bad boy all that much at all for something like Fables.
Not
I feel
really.
like so many of these characters slot into like your classic archetypal D&D thing. I think it's kind of interesting because I see Bigby, the Big Bad Wolf, as more of like a druid with their, like, because they're good at investigation, and the shape changing thing I saw as their like skin changing, the druid's skin changing abilities. So I think it's interesting. Clearly, like, we looked at the same character and we came to two different conclusions about, like, what they are and what their part in the story is.
Yeah.
But what I think is, find a character from, like, a classic Fable, a Disney movie, or a book that you read when you were growing up, and really try to think about what makes them tick. I like your idea of, like, maybe Snow White isn't necessarily the greatest person in the entire world. You can do subversions on the characters as they exist in the book. But in any case, in all of these various things, Fables does a good job of making these characters feel authentic, but also, like, modern in a weird way. Like, they have been changed by their world around them in a lot of ways. Or maybe they were never that great to begin with, and we just have these misconceptions of them going forward. Okay, so my next tweak, if we want to just do it like Serpentine style.
Let's do it.
We're not messing all that much with, you know, the core mechanics. So it's like, you know, Bigby is kind of like, I see him as a druid, Cody sees him as a barbarian, things like that. But the thing that makes Fable special is the setting. So it's an alternate New York with like a magical aura protecting everything, and the drama comes from the threats to this, like, this secret, this identity. There's a story arc kind of early on where a reporter says that she has found out about, she is on the hunt, I believe it's a she. A reporter is close to discovering Fable's town, and that's the major conflict, is we can't be discovered, we can't be found out. That could ruin everything, that could, you know, get us in a lot of trouble, this and that. So most of the, I feel like the big threats, at least early on, should be all things like the continued safety of their existence. While there's the occasional foray into like the original realms, which is magical and dangerous, the best stuff is in this hidden world, this urban fantasy aesthetic. This is especially true in the second arc too, where there is a revolution at the farm upstate, where they put the fantasy animals who don't necessarily have the ability to shapeshift into a human. So things like the 3 little pigs, the 3 blind mice, various, you know, like magical horses and things like that. These are all sentient beings with like thoughts and emotions and thoughts and emotions and things like that. But here they are being forced to live on a farm, while the more humanoid characters get to live it up large in New York City. So, you know, they're threatening to reveal the big secret by running amok through New York City and, you know, being themselves. So the big threat, at least in the early parts, is this continued existence of their safety and their security, which I think builds a lot of really nice tension into these like noir-ish style mysteries that Fables likes to tell. So,
I mean, yeah, 100%. A big part of this is the setting, right? Like you said before, a lot of this is basically just going to be, and this kind of goes into my next big point, or my next tweak, if you will, is the DM's got a lot of work to do. A lot of it is going to be, you're going to be introducing NPC fables. Maybe you're introducing the adversary, which is kind of like the quote unquote big bad evil guy from their original home. And you're going to deal with the mundane world, and you're going to have to put all of that into your game. And it's probably, I would argue this is probably the harder part of doing a Fables game, is just kind of putting all this stuff, but asking the players for help and having them create the fables that they are interested in exploring, and then on top of that, creating like an NPC connection, will kind of share, like, they'll be sharing the load with you a little bit, and being able to, like, for instance, it would really suck if you spent a whole ton of time, because you really liked the, you know, Sinbad and all the stuff that happened with like the Arabian Nights, and you introduced them, and none of the characters in your game, or players rather, just don't care, or like are not interested in that game, and then you just wasted all this time introducing these fables. So having the players come up with connections before the game starts, and fleshing out those characters in a way that's interesting and unique, is not only going to be easier and faster for you, but you're going to get interactions that the players actually want, versus interactions that they're just kind of dealing with because this is what you brought to the table.
Sure.
And while you could do big combat encounters and things like that, I think the best approach for these are going to be a lot of social conflicts, a lot of big overarching mysteries. And then, of course, when things get too heated, the party or maybe some individuals may need to deal a little bit of hurt. But I do think that the combat encounters will kind of be smaller scale, at least at the beginning. Again, a lot of this is world building and using fairy tales. If you're super familiar with the Fable stories, you could just impose the comic characters if, like, you really need a quick fix and, like, you don't have the time to do world building. But also, Fables is really just taking the fairy tales we know and kind of turning them on their head a little bit in most cases. And, you know, like, everyone's kind of got a, you know, wow, okay, brain just turned off. Take those Fable characters, you know, from, you know, your favorite Disney movies or just folklore. I mean, they even get into mythology a little bit, if memory serves. I mean, shit. One of the big things you find out is that Santa Claus is super real, and he's like a mega god tier fable because he's just super strong. Like, you can kind of do whatever you want and just kind of put your spin on it.
I believe it's like the more belief someone has in you, the more powerful you become.
Exactly, and Santa Claus is such a believed individual that he's just like god tier. And then I think last but not least in this point is making sure to reflavor things. I think is going to be a key part of like the immersion process, and that includes a lot of things. Like, not only is it like the character class and all that stuff, but it's also like that +1 sword you want to give somebody, maybe more like Aladdin's sword gifted by a genie, or magic missile. Maybe it's more like Ozma's emerald spear, which is a fucking deep cut into one of the wizards in the Fables universe that I didn't know until I was reading. But yeah, it's stuff like that is going to, and then like I said, 5e is it's a good base, and it does give you opportunity to play some of the quote-unquote not so powerful or maybe not so balanced classes, because it's not about whether or not you're gonna, you know, kick some ass in a combat. It's more about like solving mysteries and like dealing with the, you know, the trauma of, you know, having to basically leave your home to go live in modern day, you know, quote unquote modern day New York City.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And then finally, my biggest tweak is maybe like come up with a short list of like advantages / disadvantages things. There are a lot of RPGs out there that have things like this. It's almost like a point buy system. Various things that your character has to do or must do when it reaches certain situations. So for instance, one of the ones that my friends and I always liked to talk about and make fun of was there was one called Delusion, which is like your character thinks they're very good at this thing, but they're very bad at it actually. So that you're like, you know, it's like, oh, I'm very good at like talking, you know, I'm very good at being streetwise, and it's like, nope, he's not very good at being streetwise at all. There are a lot of characters that have like weird little traits that are, you know, subversions of these fairy tale characters, and you can really use that to play around with them. And if, you know, it could be used for something like maybe giving you know, like initiative or advantage on something. So it's like Prince Charming is a serial cheater, Big Bad Wolf smokes lots of cigarettes, and it's because he's like modeled after a noir type detective, but you find out that like his sense of smell is so good he can just smell lying on people, so he always smokes cigarettes to make people like not be afraid to be around him. Things like that. So, you know, maybe like vices or other, you know, other things like that, something that a character is good at or bad at, and if they really lean into it and they really embrace this thing that makes them, you know, bad, there should be some like reward mechanics associated with it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Advantages and disadvantages.
So all this being said, what does this look like at the table? I can start if you want, or I can just go ahead and do it, but like we talk a lot of talk, but like what does all this look like? And like, maybe what, you know, what's the kind of scenario that you're going to get into? And do you mind if I start?
Go ahead.
So I think once everyone, you know, once you've kind of gotten through making everybody's character and finding some cool social connections to each other, I think the one shot or even the campaign should start small. Perhaps, you know, very similar to the book or to the comics, perhaps it's like the Rose Red murder, and the party needs to discover what happens to another Fable. You know, bonus points if you can connect them to a character in the party in some way. And then during the mystery, start including other important information. obviously people who don't want you to succeed for whatever reason should show up and like kind of block their path. But it should be about exploring the world and talking with the different fables that you've cooked up, and, you know, whether or not they can give them viable information, or checking crime scenes, or just areas where they may have seen whoever this fable is, and like being able to investigate and like figure out what actually happened to them. And if you want to continue this campaign further, obviously it would be kind of a slow setup into, you know, the adversary if you want to go down the routes of the comics, trying to, you know, maybe something tries to attack Fabletown and ultimately fighting and defeating them, ramping up that conflict with like random attacks, or like, you know, maybe there's like arcs here and there where like the mundane world starts to get a whiff of what's going on and like the party's got to deal with it. You know, those are the kinds of things I would, you know, you don't necessarily need to follow the comics, you know, note for note, but you should start small and kind of work your, you know, much like any other story, start small and work your way up to this big climactic situation, and, you know, and end on that note.
I think that I would start them off with a threat to their secret. Really start with an emphasis on this idea that, you know, there is a real threat if the world finds out like who or what they really are, and kind of move forward with go forward with that. That would be my big thing is your safety is as like, you know, political refugees is under threat, and, you know, if this information gets out, then the adversary is coming, or whoever the villain ends up being. But in any case, that would be mine. Probably like a heist or something to get something to continue the safety of Fabletown. So
yeah, and, you know, it's also worth mentioning, because I like the idea of introducing more of like the threat of the mundane world finding out, and like who, maybe one of the other fables who's a little more human, or can pass off as a human fairly easily, is the one that puts the hurt on Fabletown from the mundane world. You know, maybe they're the ones who spill the beans, and they're kind of against Fabletown for whatever reason, and you kind of have to deal with all, like, you know, all of that stuff kind of hitting you at once. Like there's a lot of cool things you can do with this in this setting.
Yeah.
But that's all I got. What about you?
Yeah, that's it for me as well. Hey Cody.
Yeah.
If people liked this episode and they want to learn more, what are some ways that they could potentially learn more?
Man, they could go to our website at www.fandomroulette.com, where all of our episodes go live. There's little bios with us and about the, you know, who we are as people, and, you know, things that we're working on. And at the bottom, there's a little area where you can fill out, you know, basically your internet tag, your internet handle, if you will, and just general, like, saying hi. But for these new episodes, especially with Nerdy Affair, you can kind of, we are looking for people to put their suggestions of stuff that they'd like us to talk about. You know, we've done a couple of various things in the nerdy spectrum, but we'd like to hear from you, the fans, about what kind of, you know, pop culture media or nerdy references you'd like us to tackle, and see, you know, and move forward with that. And you can do all that at the bottom of our website.
Yeah. And then, okay, if there's other things that people want to engage with us on social media, what are some ways that they could potentially do that, Cody?
Oh, man, they could go to our Twitter at fandomr_podcast. That's our Twitter handle. And you can, you know, interact with us that way. That's where a lot of our, like, updated, like, information comes from when shows go live, or when I stream on Mondays, you know, those kinds of things. It'll be on Twitter. But you can also interact with us on Facebook and Instagram. If you search Fandom Roulette, you basically, that's just kind of where we hang out and, you know, look at funny memes and just kind of laugh and have a good time. So yeah, if you're looking to interact with us, you can do that there.
And yes, what are some other places that people can find us outside of the original place that they found us.
We're on a couple different places. So we're on SoundCloud, we're on Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, basically your RSS catchers. We are all there. Just search Fandom Roulette.
Yes. And when you're there, please remember to rate, review, and please remember to rate, review, and subscribe.
Yes.
Give us a nice comment. Help us move up those ranks.
Punch the bell.
Ring that bell. All those wonderful things.
Yeah.
Anything you can do helps, and we're glad that you're here, and we want you to share the love with others. So.
Exactly.
All right. And signing off for Fandom Roulette, this is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.